Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining me today. My name's Richard Stanfield. I'm one of the team from Walfinch Home Care. I'm going to be talking a bit today about what to expect from running a home care business. For many people coming into this, you may not have run a business before. It may be a totally different sector that you're used to. So I'm aiming to give you a kind of good idea of what to expect from running your first business, your first home care business, the kind of support to expect, the kind of pitfalls that you can expect when running your own business, and just try and give you a good overview of really what it's all about and how we help franchisees to succeed. So, as I say, my name's Richard, that's my colleague Julie. We've worked together for a number of years. I've been in the franchising sector for about 20 years now, in the care sector for about 8 of those years. And I've worked with probably hundreds of different franchisees over the years, from new starters, brand new startups, right to much larger, multi-territory, multi-million pound businesses. So I want to share a bit of my experience today in terms of what you can expect if you're looking at buying a franchise for the first time, what's involved, what to expect, and really trying to avoid some of those pitfalls and how we help you on that journey. So I think one of the first things that you want to expect if you're running a business for the first time or coming into a franchise for the first time, you need to get comfortable with being uncomfortable and expect to get uncomfortable in certain situations. You will come into this with different backgrounds, and all the franchisees that I work with at the moment, very, very few are from a care background. They come from all sorts of management backgrounds, could be marketing, could be financial, could be legal backgrounds, but very few actually come into this with any experience of care whatsoever. So, but I think that applies to all businesses. If you're starting for the first time, you want to be getting uncomfortable with things. There's going to be situations that come up. You're going to come into this, you're not going to know everything to start with. So, and part of our role as the franchise support team, in my role, I actually go and visit franchisees and their businesses, and we have review meetings of how we can help grow the business. Part of my role and my colleagues should be really coming in and maybe making you feel uncomfortable as well. Because if we're not doing that, we're not actually pushing you out of your comfort zones, and we're really not helping you. Now, that's not to mean we're not sadists, we're not going to come in and, but we want to, if we're not having those uncomfortable conversations sometimes that help point you in the right direction, then we're not doing our role either. And we don't expect you to know everything when you're coming in to run your first franchise. So you'll come into this with a certain amount of experience, you'll have a background that you bring to it, but when you start a new business, straight away you're going to come in, you're going to have to learn an awful lot. You'll have the specialism that you bring with you, but suddenly you're finding you're having to wear a lot of hats in that business. So you may suddenly have to be a finance person, you may have to be a salesperson, you're dealing with HR, you're dealing with admin, you're dealing with operational things. And all this can be very daunting, and in a new business when you're starting out, this is inevitably the kind of situation that you're going to be in. But what we want as franchisors, and for yourself to succeed, is to get out of that position as soon as you can. So we're helping you, we're guiding you in terms of what are the roles that you're going to need to take on in the business, what sort of things can you pass on to the team as it grows, and we advise you in terms of the team members that you're going to need. Because I've worked with a lot of franchisees that find it hard to move out of this first kind of stage, and they're very much down in the weeds for quite a long time. And after your first few months, you don't want to still be in that situation where you're very hands-on and sort of really in the day-to-day nitty-gritty of your business. So we sort of help and guide you of how to move beyond that. And I'll give you examples of people I've worked with. There was a franchisee that I used to work with who was an accountant, actually. And he was a very, very smart guy, really good. But his comfort zone was to be in his office, sat behind the laptop and looking at the spreadsheets, and because that was where he was comfortable. And he knew what he was doing with that. But we would have conversations, and a few months in, the business wasn't really quite going where he thought it was going to. He wasn't really engaging with the team. He was very much, say, in his office, wasn't talking to the team members, wasn't involving them in decisions and all this kind of stuff. And I said, "Look, I can see the problem here. You really need to be getting out from behind the desk." And he felt quite uncomfortable when we were talking about this. There was no element of business development going on, no sales, no marketing, because that wasn't his speciality. So he didn't really know. If he could avoid doing that, he would at all costs. So we ended up, I had to look, let's take this meeting out of the office. We'll go for a walk, and we started to go knock on a few doors. We started to meet a few people, and he suddenly, he kind of got it. And it's just sometimes that nudge that we need to give people, just to help them, move into those areas that they don't always feel comfortable with. But I say you want to be conscious with a new business that you're not staying at that level for too long, and staying in those day-to-day weeds. And then, as your team's growing, you'll be taking on more team members as this business starts to take off. Don't be afraid to have difficult conversations with your team members. And these go for any business. It's not just in the care sector. What you tend to find is you're recruiting people, you're taking on some senior members of staff. In our case, you're taking on carers as well. And you can feel very, very dependent on those people in the early days of your business. And if you're not careful, you can let them rule the roost quite quickly. So it's always to not be afraid of, if someone's not on board with what you're doing, don't be afraid to pull them aside and have those difficult conversations, because if they're not on board with your journey, that's going to hold your business back dramatically. And I've seen that happen a lot in some cases, that people feel, I don't want to upset this person, and they will do anything to avoid doing that. And I've actually seen some businesses almost come to the brink of running out of money because they're just too scared of upsetting their staff and those staff leaving. But those staff will be replaceable. And when you get on board with that, you get new people on board, you learn that. And that's the only way that you're going to grow beyond those, those first stages. So you're also, if it's your first business, you're coming into this, you've got a bit of a team around you, whether you like it or not, you are the leader of this business. And you need to display those leadership skills. And again, that's something that's not always comfortable for people. But you want to be portraying confidence all the time with your team. Because if you're not, that rubs off on them, and they really look to you in terms of how you're behaving. So no matter what sort of day you're having, what sort of week, you always want to come in, show that sort of confidence, because that rubs off on your team. And in times of pressure, that's not always easy. And I can think of another example, a franchisee that I used to work with, again, a great guy. He was very driven, very determined, but he wasn't necessarily a people person. And he started to find that there was quite a high turnover of staff in his business. And we looked at this and we talked about it, and I could see straight away what was happening, that it was his demeanor. He was just quite abrupt. He could be quite critical without really realizing it. And we said, we need to recognize that. You need to change that within yourself. So we made plans around that. Fortunately, he had a wife that could move into the business, and she fulfilled that role of overseeing the team. And it made such a huge difference, because she was always supportive with the team, always encouraging, always empowering them, making them feel that they were valued. And people were no longer leaving that business. The retention improved 100%. That business moved on to be a very, very big, successful business. So as your business grows, it's so important that you have the right people in the right seats within your team. Look at where your skills are missing within that business. Don't necessarily be employing based on job titles. Look for where the skills gaps are within your business. So if you're at a certain size, but your sales are dropping, have you got the right person in that business that's dedicated to doing that sales element, that marketing element? Because that's a role that you're going to need to fulfill. So be looking at that, but also you want the people with the right sort of attitude that are going to take you forward. And also, again, I've seen a reluctance to let people go that have maybe been with someone from day one, but they can actually become barriers to growth if they're not on your journey, or the business has outgrown them in terms of their experience and in terms of their ability. In our business, we have registered managers, and they are such a key part of the business that if that role isn't right, you will never get to the potential of what this business could be. And again, a business that I worked with, they had a registered manager that they took on board from day one. Lovely person, and they worked with them okay for the first year or so. But as the business grew, there was a lot of cracks, a lot of issues that started to appear. But this person felt very loyal to them and was really very reluctant to actually let this person go. So again, I had to have that difficult conversation with them to say, this is what's actually holding your business back. And eventually, they were able to replace that particular registered manager with somebody that was more experienced and brought a lot more to the business. And the difference that made was huge. And that business, it went from there to there almost within a few months. And the franchisee came to me and said, Richard, I wish I'd done that years ago, but hindsight's a wonderful thing. So, but be aware of these things if you're going to be running your business for the first time. Again, set expectations with your team members when they join you. It's so important that you build the right culture in your business, because I think particularly in a care business, having that right culture will retain your staff, it will attract clients, and you will just have a much better business. Now, what you don't want is any of your team members not to be on board with your journey and be living the culture and values that you want to have in your business. So it's so important when you're recruiting, when you're working with your team, that you enforce these all the time with them. And they know the expectations on them, and there's no excuses for them not to do that. So, and if you're going to join a franchise, you're all here today looking at franchises, then obviously you're coming to something that there's an element of support that comes with that. And I would say for everybody, make the most out of your franchisor. So there will be a lot of regional meetings, there'll be conferences, there'll be events with your fellow franchisees. Make sure that you attend as many of those as you can, because you don't want to be working on your own in your little silo when there's so much information and support that you can gain from your colleagues in the network. So, and I've seen this happen where people become very kind of isolated and they're not making the effort to join these things, but you can gain so much knowledge and your business will grow so much more by getting involved in that and sharing that. So always set KPIs with your teams as well. So every member of your team, make sure they have a clear set of KPIs that they're working towards. Now, I've worked in businesses that don't do that, and as the teams get bigger, then it can become very wishy-washy. They can veer off in the lane. Nobody's got really a clear idea of what it is that their daily and weekly tasks are. So when you have a clear set of KPIs in there with all your team members, and this is what we do with our franchisees, we make sure that we help set those with you and give you the tools to be able to do that. Then what you're being enabled to do, you're managing those KPIs and not the individuals. So that makes your role so much easier and so important in terms of everybody working towards a goal and you making sure that you're reaching the goals that you want to. So, and I think this is a really, really important point. We really push this a lot with our franchise owners. And I think this applies to most businesses actually. If you're out there networking, it is a great way to grow your business. So people buying to people. A lot of people like to do more passive sales and advertising, things like that, where they can do leaflet drops, they can do advertising. And there's an element of that, don't get me wrong, but they expect that just doing that, the phone's going to ring, we're not going to have to get out there and meet people. But for you to be actually going out, for us, we deal with a lot of referral providers in the home care sector. And it's not a hard sell. I always say to people, you're not going out there selling, you're building relationships. We would expect franchisees, when they're first with us, to be going out and meeting 10 to 20 new referral providers every week. And that will be such a key part of the business that will grow, help you to grow from zero to £1 million within 3 years. If you did nothing else but networking in your business, it would work. And part of my role with new franchisees, I go out with them and we do some of this together. We go to events, we go and meet people, we put on events for the community. And from my perspective, it's always the part that franchisees are most fearful of doing. And that really is getting out their comfort zone. But when we've gone and done it, they always come back feeling, actually, that was pretty easy. we approach it where we're actually trying to give something back to the people we're talking to. It's not just us going to them and saying, can you refer us? It's actually, we've got these community events going on locally. We'd love to invite your company because we feel you could benefit from that. And those kind of conversations, everybody will engage with that. So it's how you do it, but we spend a lot of time supporting our franchisees to do that, to get out there. And if you're getting that bit right and investing the time in this part of the business, you will make it successful. And importantly, know your numbers. Some of you may be from financial backgrounds, so you'll be on top of that, but for a lot of people, they're not necessarily. So it's so important that you're working with your accountant, that you understand what your margins are, that you understand what your costs are in the business, and that you're looking at your management accounts so that you can look ahead, you can forecast, you can identify possibly where there may be issues coming down the line. But if you're identifying these things early, you can do something about it. And there's nothing worse than leaving issues to fester till the last minute. If you're talking to banks, they feel comfortable talking to people who understand their business. So if you were needing further loans or lending, then they will be far more comfortable talking to somebody that's approaching them months in advance of a potential issue, rather than somebody that's approaching them today and I can't pay my staff. So be aware of that. But we have a team in our franchise support group. We have accountants that work with our franchisees as well. So we help with that. Part of my role, I have regular meetings with franchisees to look at those numbers as well. But we strongly encourage that you have a grasp of that and you're overseeing those on a regular basis as well. Prepare and plan. You will not hit your 3 million or 1 million in 3 years target if you're not planning your business. So we develop a business plan with you. But ultimately, that is we want you to take ownership of your business plan. And what we want is that you're really looking at a long-term goal there. What are your long-term objectives? And everybody in this room will have a different version of what that might be. But when you know what your main objectives are, you will work back from that. What do we need to do this year to hit that goal? What do we need to do this quarter? What do we need to do this month? And what do we need to do this week? And all your senior team within your business need to be on board with those goals as well to make sure that you're hitting. And without any sort of business plan, without your marketing plan, you will start to drift and you won't hit the targets that you're looking to. But again, we spend a lot of time with our franchisees helping to support with these things, helping to put together those business plans, but it's very much you take ownership of that and it's your, it's your thing that you're working with. So it's easy to be a busy fool in business. I've worked in lots of different sectors where you can chase turnover for the sake of chasing turnover. In our sector in particular, there's various ways that you can get clients for care packages. We tend to promote the private pay market, but there are local authority contracts as well that come up. And they can look quite lucrative in terms of the high-end numbers, but the margins can be very, very tight on those. And I've worked with franchisees that went down this route because it was, I wouldn't say it was easy, but it's kind of an approach where you can get a constant drip of work coming through. But they were saying to us, we're just not really making any money, what are we doing? And it's very easy to see why that was. Now, this particular business had a great turnover, so as a franchisor, that's good for us, but we want franchisees to be profitable. We want you to be sustainable, profitable businesses. So we actually looked at his business and we said, look, you need to scale it back. You need to focus on the private pay market. So that means actually handing some work back to local authority, which you may not feel comfortable doing, but that's going to be better for you in the long run. So the business actually took quite a drop to begin with, but they gradually built it up with the private pay sector work, which made a huge difference to them. And in fact, they were actually doing less effort for more margin. And then they eventually got back to where they were turnover-wise, but were massively more profitable as a result of that. So again, it comes back to knowing your numbers, but you can chase work for the sake of getting work. But as a franchisor, we want you to, we want to make sure that the work that you're doing is profitable. So to scale a business, we provide a lot of systems within our business that you have access to. So we want to automate as much of the processes as possible. So there's very little admin, there's very little paperwork that has to be done, if any now. So whether it's recruitment, whether it's sales, whether it's financial, we have the systems in place to enable you to automate as much of these things as possible, which means less time for you and your team to be involved in these things. But it also means for us and for you that we can get a lot of data from the systems that we're using, which helps give you vital data and statistics that will help you make informed decisions about how you need to grow your business, which areas you need to focus on. And again, as part of my role, we spend a lot of time with franchisees looking into those. And we have actually developed our own key metric tool where we look at that on a monthly basis, and we look at operational items, we look at financial, we look at business development, and that helps benchmark franchisees with other businesses in the network as well. So we, on a regular basis, can work with franchisees to say, actually, yes, you're on track with this part, but this part of the business is actually starting to decline, so we really need to focus on a plan to improve that and get back. And without having that kind of process in place, again, things can drift very quickly and you don't really understand what's going on in the business. And one final thing that we do, I've talked about the business plan, I've talked about the importance of knowing your numbers. We really want to sort of distill that down to focusing on what's the really important things that are going to drive your business forward. And this is something we do internally as well. We know exactly what our goals are, and every week we have a weekly meeting with our team, and we call it our scorecard. So we're just looking at key numbers that are driving towards the goals that we're looking for. So that might be the number of leads that have come in, it might be the number of sales meetings we've had that week, it might be the number of carer recruitment interviews we've done, whatever it is. But we have a set number of these numbers on our scorecard, and every week as a team we're reviewing those, and we are laser focused on what because those are the things that are going to drive the business forward. And we show our franchisees how to do this and we help them to do it. But without focusing on those key numbers, everything else is noise. There's so much that goes on week that you get drawn into, that you get distracted with, which actually isn't going to help you much, but takes up so much of your time. So keep absolutely focused on those key numbers. So as a team, we support our franchisees, we do a lot of training, and we provide all the tools and systems to do this. So thank you for listening to me today. If you want any more information about Walfinch, you can find more information about us there.